Jesus said, if any man believe in me, then as the scripture says, out of his belly will flow living water, rivers of living water. Now, to believe in Jesus means much more than to profess belief in him, as in to say you believe in him, or to entertain, even most of the time, the idea that you do. It doesn't mean to live in accordance with what he teaches most of the time, or to claim the benefits that are attached to living that way according to his stated promises, without actually living the conditions of those stated promises as recorded, as spoken by him. To believe, in the sense of the word in its ancient meaning, in the Greek, the Hebrew, means to actually orient everything you do, everything you feel, everything you say to whatever the thing is. And so to believe in Jesus is to reconcile your life to how you sincerely believe he would speak, act, feel, and so on in every situation. The phrase living waters, rivers of living water, that's a deep one, and we'll come back to it partially for the duration of the video. Out of his belly is a really bad translation. That word translated as belly could mean different things, but I'll just tell you in this case, a much better rendering would be out of his mind and out of his heart, or out of her mind and out of her heart, because the organs through which God interacts with us I think that's the best way to put it, are our heart and our mind, or our desire and what we think. So, the Lord was speaking with me just now. I just got out of the shower. And it was about a 10-minute shower. And every single morning until the moment I show up to work, and sometimes throughout the day, although I have to kind of orient my attention in different directions throughout the day, and my energy level drops throughout the day, substantially so. But anyway, every single morning from when I get up, which varies between midnight and as late as 5 a.m., but averages about 2:30 or 3 at the moment. From that time until I show up to work, the Lord pours these living waters out through me. I shouldn't have to say this, but there's nothing special about my claim to the promise I shared. There was nothing in that said anything about any particular person. In fact, quite the opposite. It said, "This will be the case for everyone who believes in me." So if you don't have this experience, that indicates where your belief lies. But I'm not making this video to kind of point fingers at people and poke you in the eyes. I just want to expand your awareness of what's possible. Rather, I've been instructed to expand your awareness of what's possible. I was going to go about this a very different way, but in my experience, God knows what he's doing, so let's do it. So what I'm going to try to do is, when that morning period is coming to a close, and I find myself in the shower, doing what I need to do as fast as I can because I have other things to do, plus the ideas don't stop, but I can't write while I'm doing certain other things. So I have a pad and a pen close by, and a lot of times I'll jump out of the shower and take notes and jump back in, or I'll keep the pad of paper and pen up above where the water is so I can write as I'm showering. But it's pretty tricky. But always when I jump out, I have this flood of thoughts that I have to write down as fast as I can because they evaporate. And true to evaporation, I'm sure with what I'm about to share, you're probably only going to get about 50% of what actually flowed, but I'll do my best. And the Lord told me, I want you to, instead of taking notes this time, go out and make a video and share all of the things that went through your mind and heart in those 10 minutes. And so this is probably going to be a long video, but it's necessary to help those of you who need this to understand what's possible and what the Lord's promises mean in this case. For many others, the things that I'm about to say are going to be useful in themselves. Okay, where did it start? When I walked into the bathroom, what I was thinking about was how this one time I was in Mexico with my family, and my kids were doing their best. They're pretty good at persuading me. They're getting pretty good at this. And they were working on me so hard because every morning at this resort we were at, they had this contest where there was somebody hired for entertainment, and they spoke really good English, and they looked like they had horns with these little tufts. It's just the shine, folks. I don't have horns. So there's a guy down there on the pool deck, and there's a loudspeaker, and there was some game that they're playing all the time. Usually there were contests for prizes. And I'm watching him, and I'm cranking my brain because there's this thing where they had 2 ropes and a basketball, and you had to raise, lower, spread, or join the ropes to get the basketball to slide down the arc created by the ropes and drop into a 5-gallon bucket. And then they had some prize. My kids are like, Dad, you could do that. Dad, you need to do that. Dad, you got to try. And they just wouldn't stop. And there were enough drunk people getting out of the pool and trying these things that enough delay was created that their persuasion overtook my reluctance. And I went down, and they came with me, and they went first, and they gave it a good go. The penalty for losing was you had to jump into the pool. Anyway, so it came to my turn, and the guy says in his English, he's speaking English, he's pretty good at it. He goes, "Are you ready?" And I just kind of like purpose stared him down, and I said, "Nací listo," like that, right? Which means I was born ready. And he just about died of surprise and laughter. And then I slipped on the pool deck and hit my butt really hard. So it's a funny story on multiple levels. But I went again, and I got really close, but it was a really hard game. So anyway, I had a bunch of thoughts triggered off of Nací listo that I was intending on sharing with one of my friends who speaks Spanish. And that transition, so I relived that memory. And then that transitioned into a whole host of other thoughts. So one thing I thought of was, I can't recreate the transition, but I was thinking about how I went to airborne school back in the Cretaceous period. And it was a 3-week school, if I remember correctly. And at the time, I was dating a girl who I loved more than anyone I had ever loved to that point in my life. And the idea of being away from her for 3 weeks, which this makes my eyes roll today, was very unpleasant. And so I was praying about whether or not I should go. And at the time, which, a thing must be what it is. At the time, what I mean by that in this case is that our essence of who we really are is hidden, but it has emissions that register in the temporal world. And it's quite humorous, actually, once you learn about this and you can see it. But it can be really sad, too, because it's one of the keys of learning more about a person than even they know at a glance. So I was reliving this memory in greater resolution than the original experience, which is something that happens through the Spirit. But you also do it in a very, very short time. So it's super intense. So I was reliving this memory, and anyway, so a thing must be what it is. And I had a reputation at the time, which some things don't change, of being a very religious person. I should say devout person. And I was among a lot of people who weren't in this situation. And I was one of 300 of the people in the group I was in one of 2 out of 300 that were awarded the opportunity to go to this school. And so it was a merit award. And so I was praying about going, and it seemed to me that if I didn't, it would reflect poorly on the Lord, because here I was a known believer, and if I performed poorly and quit, didn't go to this thing I was chosen to go to, I thought it would look bad, and I didn't want to be the cause of decreasing the glory of God in the eyes of men. So as I prayed about this, that's sort of the result of the conversation I had with the Lord. And so I had all the reasons I needed to go, even though I really didn't want to. And then I went. I should say, even though I really wanted other things almost as much as I didn't want to make God look bad to people who didn't know any better. So I went, and I had a really hard time because, as I've told you before, I had asthma, and I guess I still do, but I didn't know it at the time. And I was doing pretty well amongst the group I was in, but I don't know if it was an elevation change or what, but I got my butt kicked at Airborne School. And it was tough. I went through a series of experiences there where I fell out of the first run. I couldn't keep the pace. I should say I didn't keep the pace. Because as I've talked about before, I was getting to the point where I couldn't see anymore because I didn't have enough oxygen. And they do this thing, I don't know if they do it anymore, but they say it's for preventing heat stroke, but it's actually just to humiliate you. If you fail a run, they make you walk through this outdoor shower tunnel thing where everybody can see you, so it's in front of everyone, and then you're all wet. And so it's really clear who the inadequate people are. So I went through that, and their rule was if you fall out of 2 runs, you get sent home. You only get 1 chance, and I guess 2 chances. So I prayed that night, and I said, Lord, you told me to come here, and I'm here. This is really hard. I don't know how I can run any faster than I am. I feel like I'm going to black out. And he said, did you? And I said, no, I stopped before I did. So come talk to me again once you've blacked out, right? So I was talking to him, and I said, look, I don't care about being humiliated, but I care about humiliating you. So what can I do? Because if this were just for me, I'd quit. I don't want to be here. I really don't. This doesn't mean anything to me. I don't care about having another badge on my chest. I got more important things to do than this from my perspective, but I will not humiliate you. If there's anything I can do to prevent that, I don't want to do that. And I care about these people, and I don't want to be an instrument to make things harder for them to see and do the right thing. And he made it very clear that I was supposed to be there. And I said, Lord, one of 2 things is going to happen tomorrow. I'm either going to make that run or I'm going to pass out or maybe die. I don't know. But I am going to keep that pace until I cannot. Literally unconscious or worse. And I said, that's what's going to happen. So the next morning came and the run started, and, I was running and ran out of oxygen just like the day before. And I just didn't care. And I couldn't see. And I just didn't care. I put my arm out so I could kind of feel where the next person was, because we were running in a column. And just kept going. That was very irritating for them. They didn't know what was going on. So anyway, luckily, I guess I didn't get punched in the face. We were running too fast. And I made the run. And the second the run ended, I had the most intense pain in my knee that it was greater than any physical pain I had felt to that point in my life. It hurt so bad. It felt like my kneecap was rubbing right on my legs. And I could barely stand. We were at a standstill, thank goodness, but I was like, oh my goodness, my knee hurts so bad, I can't even walk. And this is just in the morning, and the way those training days work, you run around and everything else. And something it was a Friday, and there was some event on base where a VIP was coming or some crazy thing like this, and so they voluntold a couple of people to go cut grass with scissors or whatever they had to do. And the rest of us were released to go back to the barracks for an early weekend. And because I was praying, I was like, Lord, I can't even walk. What am I going to do? And we had weekends off. So I spent the whole weekend, I went back to the barracks. I prayed and I prayed and prayed. And the result I came to was I will go to a doctor and on base there. And as long as he doesn't indicate that there's going to be any kind of permanent damage, I will find a way to keep up with the runs and the jumping, because that's all we did was run and jump off of things, which obviously is not great for a knee. I'm going to just do it and find a way. And I went to the doctor. The doctor checked me out and asked me questions, did his thing. And he said, oh, you've got, I don't remember what he said, but there's a muscle problem with the one muscle that keeps your kneecap where it's supposed to be. So it's like all weird. And you've got bone on bone contact. And I'm just hearing all this like, yeah, okay. And I said, is there gonna be any permanent damage if I just, because he's like, well, so obviously you're gonna have to go home. I mean, you're gonna be on crutches from now until at least 3 weeks from now. And then it's gonna take time to get better. And I just said, well, what would the damage be if I just did it? If I just stayed and finished? And he looked at me like, did you hear what I said? And he goes, no, I mean, you're not gonna have permanent damage, but I know how much that hurts. He said, I can't give you narcotics. You're in airborne school. We're not allowed to. It's not the safest thing in the world to jump out of planes when you're all scatawumpus. And he said, and even if I do, I mean, Percocets aren't even going to dull this. And I said, he was thinking he was convincing me to go home. And meanwhile, he was saying exactly what I needed to hear to stay. And I was just like, all right, we're good. And he said, so should I do the paperwork so you can go home? And I said, no, I'm staying. I said, but thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And I took off. And Monday morning, I was there and I ran. And the pain went away over the next few days. I should say it reduced. And I was able to finish. Okay, what does that have to do with anything? Well, the reason the Lord took me through that memory in the shower, in that, I said, there's richness of details, that he reminded me that not too long after that, I found myself in Chile on an ecclesiastical mission. And one of the first things we did once I got there, the group that I was in, who'd been there for a while, we went to some park. And because I had been wondering why God was so intent on me staying there, because he told me, you need to stay there. It was so clear. And then I had these miracles to back it up. And I knew that's exactly where I needed to be. I to that point in my life, I'd never been sure about what I needed to be doing and where I needed to be. So here I am in Chile a while after that, and you know, a bunch of young guys, there's guaranteed to be some shenanigans. So the shenanigans were that there was this cable bridge over a river. It wasn't that high. I mean, it was probably like 20 feet off the ground. And it was just like a braided cable. And I told the guys I was with, and someone has a video of this, I don't know where. I said, watch this. I can climb up this thing, because I did stuff like this all the time in the Army. Very stupid. And they're like, oh yeah, let's see it. Also very stupid. So I went up there and I threw my legs around and I started climbing across this cable. And they said, hey, pause for a picture. And so I let my legs down and I'm hanging from this rope way off the ground. And it took forever to get the camera. And I was like, dang, guys, hurry. So they finally took the picture, and all of a sudden I started getting really tired. And I was like, uh-oh, and I went from everything's fine to I'm gonna die in record timing. And I looked down, and there's all these rocks right around, big boulders, and I thought, I'm for sure gonna break a leg at least. I'll probably break it down by the ankle. I was getting kind of detailed in the analysis of how bad this damage was gonna be. Meanwhile, my hands are starting to bleed, and anyway, so you know, I started doing the deathbed repentance prayer kind of thing. And I said, I don't want to go home. I know I'm supposed to be here. That was a different chain of events. But I'd really like to be here and do this. And I dropped to the ground, and there was no thought in my mind. My feet landed in like the only place that wasn't boulders. It was like this little tiny crack that was just big enough for my 2 feet. And because of the training, instinctively, I landed just like you do when you drop out of a parachute, which is the equivalent of dropping from about 25 feet. And I was fine. And the guys watching it just couldn't believe it, because they thought for sure that at least I'd have a broken leg. And I was fine, but I felt like an idiot, which is a common theme. And then all of a sudden I knew that the reason I had to go to airborne school was so that when that happened, I wouldn't get hurt. And this is the thought that came out of all of that as the stream was flowing. Our experiences in life are not single events. There's no such thing. Everything that happens is the next link in the chain of everything that happened so far and everything that's going to happen after. Now, the things that happen before and the things that happen after are themselves their branches. The decisions and the options, they splay out. But everything flows through the current moment. It's like the focal point of an hourglass. And the decisions we make, they matter a lot. But one of the things that makes them really hard is that we tend to not even think about it. But even if we try to think about it, our perception is very limited in terms of what chain of events is this going to affect through time. It's almost impossible to see. Well, it's you're not going to see it fully, but I'm saying it's almost impossible to get it at all to any degree. It's very hard. So usually you can only see this in reverse. And this is one reason why our value, the things we value in life, is typically, it's more accurately appraised in reverse. This is why. There's one reason why. There are a lot of reasons. And so when I was evaluating whether I wanted to stay at airborne school or even go in the first place, I was thinking in terms of here and now and what's the evident value here and now. Thankfully, I had enough reasons in my limited perspective to see that it was the best thing to do, even if I had no clue how important it was. And that is almost always the case. God will always show you what's better. He can almost never show you by how much. So when you make your decisions and something looks a little better, you better do it. You better always do what's best, because you can't see the things that come next. Or if you do see them, you're not going to see very many of them. Like I'm not seeing very many of the mosquitoes that are biting me. So that was one stream of thoughts. And I thought about this chain and the decisions we make and so on. And then I started to think about how I don't even know how to put this into words. When Jesus was on the cross, how he managed to attend to the needs of his mother, who was, obviously in pain. But, there's nothing I want to do to minimize that in any way. But obviously what he was going through was far worse, incomparably worse. But he attended to her needs. He perceived them. And what manner of man is this, that in his operating system, with all these overflowing signals of pain and loneliness greater than anything even he had ever felt, which already was greater than anything almost anyone will ever understand, no matter what they face in life. In the midst of all of that, he had some detector that picked up the needs of his mother and was able to empathize with her situation and then pause all of that. And his friend John, who had left him briefly, but he did, and solved those two problems at once by assigning him to care for her. And that's one of the most beautiful things that, one of the most beautiful examples of what love really is that I know of that can be shared. And then I started thinking about Mary, because it's so interesting how little we have from her in our scriptures, in spite of what a holy, holy woman she was. And one of the very interesting things about Mary is that there's no record that I'm aware of in the Gospels of her ever complaining about anything. It's amazing. And there are plenty of examples of her her suffering in life. There's enough information to sort of walk through that a bit. But there really isn't. And there's detail of her being told about this was the transition idea. I was thinking about a hammer, and I'll get to that. That's what it was. I was thinking about a hammer, and I got to Mary, and then Mary took me to the cross. That's what happened. So hopefully I'll remember to go back to the hammer, but I don't want to stop on the Mary thing. So Mary, Mary, if you think about the level of detail in the announcement of Jesus, and that she was going to be pregnant with him, and it's pretty incredible to see her reaction. I'm not sure. I mean, I think that's worth writing on a banner and carrying it around because it's such a wonderful example of how to react to revelation. And what she says is basically, okay. And so Zacharias was a very righteous man, right? John the Baptist's father. And when Gabriel comes to him, he's like, and he's being told all this, and he's like, so you got any proof that this is going to happen? And Gabriel's just like, yeah, well, how about you're not going to be able to say anything until it does. And it worked. Zacharias learned his lesson and finished out a good race. He's an example worthy of emulation. But Mary didn't do that. She just said, okay. And the thing is that Mary was young, but she wasn't stupid. She knew full well what it would mean if she were to get pregnant before getting married, as far as the cultural reaction. And there was no pushback from her. She was an extremely holy woman. And maybe something she understood, I don't know, was that a thing must be what it is, and that certain things co-occur. So Mary saw the same glory with Gabriel as Zacharias did. I would say greater, and I have reasons to believe that he appeared in greater glory to her than he did Zacharias. I'll just tell you what it is. It's because the glory must correspond to the message. So, yeah, she didn't doubt, and she wasn't overcome by that glory. She stood in it. And that tells you something about the caliber of person she was. And she didn't complain. Because I think she knew that great things come with great cost. And that's why she didn't complain. I don't think she was ignorant that it would carry a great cost. Although obviously you can be told something and not really comprehend it yet. And of course, at the cross, that was a crescendo of the realization of her suffering. While I'd say the duration of her life would have been the length, the intensity peaked at the cross. So, I think she understood that certain things must co-occur. And now we get to the hammer. So this is the reverse order that it flowed for me. Hammers, common hammers, they weigh about a pound, if I'm not mistaken. I've got a little maul that weighs 5 pounds. And I also have a sledgehammer. I think it weighs 25 pounds, but I don't remember. And each of these tools is meant for a purpose. And the hammer is lighter than the other two, but it's still heavy. And if you're wearing a tool belt and you're wearing it all day and it's digging in your side, the belt, pulling the belt down all day long, it's like you notice the weight. It's not fun. But the thing about it is the mass is important to the purpose. It's integrally connected. Because force equals mass times acceleration. If you've ever seen a carpenter, they swing that hammer about as fast as they can anyway. So if the hammer were lighter, it wouldn't be able to do the job. And then there was a side note, which was how you hit. I saw the nail and the hammer, and how you hit the nail matters. If you're a novice, you hit it off where you're supposed to, and the nail will bend. And so you have to hit it how it was designed to work. If you miss, obviously, it won't do anything. But that doesn't mean that the hammer's no good. So it's a little more sophisticated. Oh my gosh, my head is covered with mosquitoes. It's a little more sophisticated than you might think it is. Not just hammers, but the value of anything is complicated because there's so much in play. To truly understand, this is one piece that's not new. Almost everything I'm telling you just came to me in the shower. But one piece that's not new is to truly understand the value of one thing, you actually have to understand all of reality, which is crazy. Which is why we're so reliant upon God, amongst other things, to do the most valuable thing. So anyways, back to the hammer. So you couldn't conclude the presence or absence of value in the hammer if you're not doing it right. And some things, the accurate value appraisal requires practice and time, or at least introduction to someone who's skilled. Because where else are you going to get the idea? If you were a caveman and someone showed you a hammer, actually the odds are pretty high you'd use it as a hammer. But you get the point. If you showed a caveman a microscope, they'd use it as a hammer. Or a weapon. But not to make biological weapons like it's used today. It's funny. Have we really come that far? Or have we just become more effective at expressing human nature? So the hammer, the difference between the common hammer and a maul, so which one's more valuable? To answer the question, you have to ask the question, what are you using it for? Which is interesting. So the common hammer is used for common things that you use a hammer for, which is interesting. The maul is heavier, and so it's harder to carry around. You get tired faster when you're using it and also just carrying it. However, if what you need to do is drive stakes in rocky ground, you definitely want the maul. I speak from experience. And it's worth carrying it because you just can't do it with the regular hammer, or it's going to be way harder, take a lot more time. What about the sledgehammer? I have a giant boulder over here that I sledgehammered because it was in the way. And boy, was that a pain in the butt. But how much more of a pain in the butt would it have been with a maul or a common hammer? I don't think you could do anything with a common hammer on that particular rock, and I'm sure it's not unique. And so the question is, what are you going to do with it, and what's the worth of that? Okay, now with the hammers, if you can only carry one, which one do you carry? Again, it depends. What do you need to do? But also, what's everyone else going to do? So pause the shower thoughts for a minute, because my mind didn't go here, but in the military, when you have a squad, an infantry squad, people mostly have the same weapons, but one guy in the squad has an automatic rifle. The other rifles are just semi-automatic. And so it's basically a machine gun, but that's really overstating it. It's basically just a normal gun that has the restrictions removed that prevent it from overheating by firing it too frequently. Anyway, so that's called a SAW, which is squad automatic weapon, if I remember correctly, but I don't know. So the SAW gunner is the most important person in the squad because he sends more bullets downrange in the same amount of time. But you don't use him in the same way as the other guys in the squad. And that's because his tool is different. And because he's a saw gunner, he can do things that the other riflemen can't. But because he's a saw gunner, he can't do things the other riflemen can. And that's the way it should be for the optimal outcome. So here's a question. We're still outside of shower thoughts. Why was the brother of Jared not Jared? Why was he not the king? Why are they not called the brother of Jaredites? And the answer is because the brother of Jared did what only the brother of Jared could do, so that Jared could do what he could do if the brother of Jared did so. That's a jumbled up phrase, but hopefully you get the point. It's extraordinarily difficult for a bishop who's a good bishop to be a prophet. And it's really difficult for a good prophet to be a good king. And so, as rare as it is to find a good bishop or a good, by the way, a synonym for bishop is judge. To find a good bishop or a good prophet, to find someone who's a good prophet, bishop, and king, we didn't talk about priests, but you could lump that in because it's the same thing. And so, what's the value of a good king in God's kingdom? Not, I was going to say not nice things. What's the value of a good king? It's greater than a good priest. And that's greater than a good judge. And prophets are in there above the priests. I left them out, sorry. But what's the value of a combination of those things? It's greater than any of the single ones. Much, much, much greater. Okay, back to shower thoughts. Where were we? Hammers. So do you see the connection to the saw gunner? So if what you have to do is take out an enormous boulder, and that's going to prevent everything else that you could ever do with the hammer, like we're building a house, but first we have to get rid of this huge boulder because it's in the way. Well, the sledgehammer becomes the most valuable thing. And so you could look at a sledgehammer and say, well, what the heck? If you look at the pie chart of all things we need to do, the sledgehammer is just a tiny slice. That's measuring by frequency, not importance. The public ministry of Jesus was 3 years. His whole life was about 33. What is that as a slice of time for the world? But did anyone do or will anyone do anything more important? Nope. But, was Jesus a dad? We don't know. Controversy alert. Was he a husband? We don't know. Controversy alert. He was a son, though. How good of a son was he? That depends on your criteria. In the world's view, he would have been an awful son. He wasn't around that long, and no parent wants to see their kid die before them for their own choices. That's probably not a way you've ever thought of that one. Sorry, I gotta stick to the shower thoughts. So there are conditions where the sledgehammer is more valuable than the maul or the hammer. There are conditions where they're worth carrying around. So that brought me to the cross and Mary and not complaining, because the idea connection was a thing must be what it is, and certain things must co-occur. And so rather than complaining about the weight of a hammer, you should realize that you should only be carrying a hammer in the first place if you need its weight, because they go together. And that took me to Jesus on the cross because of him, and this is where I started, him arranging for John to take care of his mother. And why did that idea connection occur? Because Mary could have complained, but she didn't, about the fact that Jesus was so difficult to have as a son. But why didn't she complain? Was it because she got free wine at the wedding? Because she asked him to turn water into wine? I seriously doubt it. She knew something about who he was and what he was worth. In fact, she knew more about it than many other people. And she understood that these things had to co-occur, that there was no other way. And so she was grateful for the good, knowing that it came with what other people would consider bad, but what she saw was just the cost of the good. And then I saw the two thieves, or whatever criminals they were, on the crosses by Jesus. And the one guy saying, the one was taunting Jesus, and then the other one said, "We deserve to be here. But this man's innocent." And then he turned to Jesus, his head. And he said, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And then Jesus said, "Today you will be with me in paradise." And then the Lord showed me, which I had never thought of. He showed me how this thief, or whatever he was, this criminal, here he was, he had done bad things, and he knew he did bad things. And not only was he physically restrained for the duration of his life, so his choices had led him to literally be stuck in one place for the rest of his life. And it was a terminal sentence. That was it. There was no recovery for any of that in life. That was it. In spite of all that, this exchange occurred. And Jesus told me, he said, "You've helped people see," because I made a video on this. I think I've spoken about it more than once. "You've helped people see that they can do things that permanently alter their lives in a way that can't be changed. Help them see the opportunities that remain for their relationship with me." And then he explained how glorious this guy was, this criminal. Wish I knew his name. I don't know what to refer to him as except the criminal was crucified by Christ. How about the supporter of Jesus? I like that. The man who used some of his last breaths to ease the burden of one he recognized as being holier than him. That's good. So this valiant, repentant man he saw Jesus, who obviously he knew who Jesus purported to be. And obviously he knew what other people had thought about who he was. This is what was explained to me. And those people had fled. Those people were nowhere to be found. But here's this guy that everyone had written off, who happened to be nailed to a cross, facing death, justly condemned. He had nothing left in life. And yet, he spent what little he had left to comfort Jesus. And to express his faith that he was the Lord. This was not a deathbed confession. This man, in spite of whatever his past choices had been, this man showed greater faith than most of the supposed disciples of Jesus. Because he still believed that he was the Christ. And so Jesus wasn't granting him any special favors by telling him, today you will be with me in paradise. He was just comforting a man that was already living that way, who was already headed there. He just didn't know it. So no matter what choices you've made in life so far, I'm telling you, if you're still kicking, there's more good that you can do. But you have to endure to the end. So we're at 54 minutes from a 10-minute shower, and I guarantee that at least 50% of what flowed into my mind and heart evaporated before I could get it recorded. But because I didn't note this down, I just recorded it. I'm gonna have to watch this video and take notes later for my own use, because a lot of what I told you are things that I didn't know before. So I'll have to capture those, and as I do, the Lord will give me more about that and on other things. So I'm not sure if this accomplished the purpose or not, but I just wanted to make a long case for how every minute we have is an opportunity for the Lord to give us much more than you think could fit into a minute. But we have to give him the opportunity. And tremendous blessings await those who truly believe in Jesus. And he will fill your heart and your mind with information that flows as often as you pay attention to it. And in a lot of ways, the Spirit is like a lighthouse where whatever you point the light at, which is your attention, it flows through your attention. It's focused and directed towards whatever you attend, will shine back. And you'll see things that you didn't see before about that or related to that. But in other ways, we're just standing in a fire hose, and as often as you stand in front of that thing, it's just going to spray at you. You do your best to stand in it and hopefully collect up as much water as you can. Because the Lord is just like any other father. He delights to spray his kids with water. He delights. He really does. But the issue's us, because it's something we have to qualify for by actually believing him and living our lives accordingly. And that doesn't make us special. It just gets us out of the way. We impede him with the things that get in the way. But he won't run out of water, that's for sure. Okay, I'm going to end this. Take care.